I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and $1 million ain't what it used to be, but it sure is a nice start, isn't it? Here to help you start on your journey, we welcome the financial samurai himself, Sam Dogen.
And I'm super happy he's coming down the stairs to mom's basement. Sam Dogen's back. How are you, man?
Hey, Joe. Good seeing you again.
Great to see you, my friend. And I got to ask about this latest project of yours. You make this statement about we need to be where the money is. If I'm listening to this and I'm in my 20s and I'm designing my career, is this something for later, Sam, or is this something early? Like if I'm 24 years old, I'm listening to this, do I pack up and I move to one of these top 10 cities that you have on your list?
Well, the idea of being where the money is that it doesn't matter how smart you are, how good looking you are, how connected you are. If the largest company in the city or town you're living in is like a greasy spoon restaurant, you're never going to get rich. So you have to go where the big companies are, where the big jobs are, where the network are, where the people are that can help you along the way. So yes, San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Boston, LA, all very expensive places to live. But there's a reason for that. And the reason is because the income and the wealth opportunities are far greater than most other places.
It's funny we're seeing all these CEOs call people back into work, Sam. And I even said this when people were thinking they were going to work forever remotely. I was like, I don't think this is going to last. But I don't necessarily think it should last, because I don't know about you, but being around smart people, like in proximity of smart people, it just always has raised my game. And it's got to be, I think it's what you're saying here too, just being around people and comparing yourself to these people. It's a little like wolves pack hunting.
Oh, absolutely. If you're under the age of 40 and you still insist on working from home 4 or 5 days a week, I think that's a career limiting move, because at the end of the day, people who get ahead are those who build those relationships in person, right? When it comes to downturns and firing people, you're going to get rid of the person who's out of sight, who you don't know their in-laws' names or their kids' names, nothing like that. And the people you're going to keep and promote and give great opportunities to are the ones you're in the trenches together, and you go out and get that $20 rubber chicken sandwich down the street and you're talking about whatever. And so those relationships are so important that if you're under 40 or if you have less than 10, 15 years experience under your belt, you got to get into that office. You got to be in front of other people.
Let's look at your top 10 cities. San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara. Obviously, we're looking at Silicon Valley there, Sam. That's not a stretch. Second, Bridgeport, Stamford, and Norwalk, Connecticut is interesting as number 2. Obviously, a lot of money there. San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley. Okay, that's where the great Sam lives now. So got to be there. Boston, Cambridge, Newton. My daughter's there. She's lighting it up. She's working for Harvard, and there's so many opportunities, so many exciting things. I just saw MIT is now the new dream school over Harvard as well. Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, Washington, Arlington, Alexandria is number 6. I want to skip down here to number 10. Well, we'll very quickly, just the New York area, the Denver area, the Austin area. I get all those. Number 10 on your list. I think this is pretty badass. Seeing where I live. Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, Arkansas. You even have this cutout in your book where you're like, did you just do a double take when you saw Arkansas? This is an up and coming community, Sam.
Well, that's the thing. We all know where the big city centers are, the most expensive places to live in America and the world. But if you want to be a long-term investor, maybe a value investor, you want to look at those up and coming places, or those cheap places now that will be potentially more expensive in 5, 10, 20 years from now. So yeah, I did do a double take when I was doing that research and saying, wow, that's not only is it low cost, there are huge companies there. And what companies are those?
Yeah. A little company called Walmart. Yeah. Another little company called Tyson Foods, is there. I mean, you've got these great companies there, and a major university.
Right. So don't just think about, big tech and finance and consulting and all that fancy stuff, right? There are plenty of big companies out there with plenty of money to go around that provide great lifestyles. And if you can do it for a lower cost of living and do well income-wise, that's a double win. So I would see if those companies continue to do well over the next 10 years, employees can do very well as well.
It's funny. There's a guy with a fintech company, Acre Trader, who I'm friends with, and he was telling me, because he's based in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and he said when he's talking to people, he's often getting people from Silicon Valley, and at first when he tells them Arkansas, they're like, no, thank you. And he told me, Sam, he's like, if I could just get him to come with a +1 for the weekend. Bring anybody you want, just come and spend a weekend with me. That's all you got to do. He goes, then it is. And I think his quote was fish in a barrel. He's like, because they come out, they're like, wait a minute, it's beautiful. I can buy a gorgeous 3,000 square foot house for like $350,000. Like, are you kidding me? What the hell am I doing? It's gorgeous. I got college sports. I've got all this fun stuff. You know, what I like about this project is these are steps toward becoming a millionaire. And you're a person who's walked this talk already. How old were you when you became a millionaire?
You know, I didn't really know until I was doing the math at age 30, because I thought 30 was you either made it in your career or you know you're going to make it or not. So I did the math at 30. I was like, oh, I got $1 million.
That's a little pressure. That's a little pressure. If I don't make it by 30.
Well, it's weird because when I was growing up, I had some childhood traumas. You know, one of my friends died at 15, and I was thinking to myself, wow, you died at 15 and you have no more opportunity. And I was thinking to myself, well, I got to get on the ball, study hard, make my money so I can escape sooner, so I can live my life. And so I had that image of 30 because, you know, we go to college for 4 years, grade school for 13 years. And that's 8 years after college to try to grind and make something of myself, right? Because it was like, make your money. You got to find your love life, your partner for life, because biology doesn't wait for nobody. You can try to have kids before 35, and it's crazy expensive in New York City and San Francisco, where I've been living for the past 20 plus years. You got to get on the ball and focus. So to answer your question, at 30, I was like, how am I doing in my life? All right, I made VP at Credit Suisse at the time. Okay, check. Did I make $1 million? Okay, great, check. And then I look back, and it was about age 28 when my assets started inflating to the point where I had $1 million net worth.
At 28, and you talk later about this idea of compounding interest. You know, the idea that if we can get to some of these milestone numbers early in our life, like that's going to help. And you actually set a number of 250,000, like as one of these early milestones. Why is 250,000 such a big number for you, Sam?
Some people, when they're first starting out, they might feel that $1 million is very daunting, and it is very daunting. I had a goal of trying to get $1 million before I had started trying to have kids, because it was so expensive in New York City and San Francisco. And in retrospect, that was a crazy, crazy number, and you don't need to do that. But in order to get to something great, you've got to go in smaller steps. So even before 250,000, look for saving 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000. But the $250,000 mark is, I think, that break point where you start to feel the momentum of your money going for you. And why is this? Well, in 2025, the maximum 401k employee contribution limit is $23,500. Okay. We know that 75% of the time or thereabouts, you will make money in the stock market. We also know the historical rate of return for stocks is about 10% a year. So in other words, if you can amass $250,000 in stocks, you have greater than a 70% chance to earn a greater return than the maximum amount of money you can contribute to your 401k, which is currently $23,500. So when you start having these constant returns that are greater than what you can contribute, then that's really when the momentum starts building. And that's when you can think, oh, I can see $1 million in my future.
Toward that end, you pose the I don't know if it's a challenge, but you say, if you're contemplating raising your contribution by 10%, by putting 10% more into your 401k plan, like do it right now. But you and I both know what people are thinking, Sam. They're like, oh, if I do that and I end up needing that money. You've told people this in the past. Yeah, I even like, for people listening to audio here, I see the look on Sam's face like, no. Like, do you get pushback from people when they actually raise it by 10%?
I always get pushback. And the idea is if you want to outperform the masses or the median or the average, you've got to do more than the median or the average person, right? We easily end up taking the amount of time. If you want to give yourself, 5 hours to clean your house, it's going to take you 5 hours. But if you give yourself 30 minutes, you're going to get it done in 30 minutes. It's the same thing with money. When you raise your saving rate, you keep on raising it until it hurts, and then it'll hurt for a little bit, and then you're going to get used to it. And then you can keep on raising it further. So I don't think people have been pushed enough to save more. People say, "Oh, save 10%, 20%." The national personal saving rate is like 5%, which is pathetic. But then when you look at March 2020, during the height of the pandemic, the national personal saving rate shot up to about 32%. So what does that tell us? It goes from 4% to 32%. That tells us we can save and invest more if we want to. But how much do we want to? And how badly do we want to outperform? That is the question.
It is so funny how I remember that time, even though there was so much bad happening in humanity, when I saw those savings rates numbers, Sam, I actually had some faith in humanity. I was like, we can do the right thing. We can do. And then what happens in the pandemic goes away. And immediately I see the new numbers out from TransUnion, Experian that, hey, guess what we're doing with our credit cards? We're jacking up all these OPM strategies or non-strategies of getting ourselves back into debt. It's super sad, which actually brings up where you start in this project, which is this, because I think, what you're talking about is it's going to hurt. We don't push ourselves enough. What is it that gets us away from this complacency that we have to be the same? We recently spoke to one of the top female sports agents, Molly Fletcher, about complacency and about drive, right? But and she talks about the importance of knocking complacency out of the picture. But for most of us, we're like, I think I'm going to be okay. How do I get away from complacency and start chasing, number one, $1 million net worth, and then number two, $1 million a year, and these steps that you pretty eloquently walk us through?
Well, I think one of the hardest things about living in America is that life is pretty darn good. We've got a relatively stable government. We don't have wars. We've got the rule of law. And there's tons of food and free water, free Wi-Fi. So the idea is we can't too much fault ourselves for living such a comfortable lifestyle. So when you're comfortable, you don't push yourself. That's the bottom line. So you have to find it within to understand what it is. What is your why? What is it that you are saving and investing so hard for? What are you willing to sacrifice? And I think for some people, maybe many people, once they have children, that is the trigger point where suddenly they have dad power or mom power, and they work harder and save more than ever before. Or they try to get into the best shape of their life. You need to find your why, because at the end of the day, life is probably going to be okay here in America. We've got savings, rule of law, all that stuff. But without identifying your why and without doing the calculations on how expensive life could be in the future for the life that you want, you're not going to push yourself. You have to have clear whys and clear targets. For me right now, it's the clear why is taking care of my wife so she doesn't have to go grind back in the office so she can be a stay-at-home mom. And for my kids, to give them the opportunities that I didn't have, and to help them in the future when, everybody, they're going to get knocked down, they're going to get rejected. Those are my clear whys. So you have to find your why, and you have to figure out what the cost is of all those whys.
I love how Stephen Covey that is, right? Begin with the end in mind. If we begin with the end in mind, then saving becomes much easier. It also, I think, is a reason why so many of us don't have a budget, because a budget sounds horrible until there's a why behind it. And you're like, no, I'm not fencing out all the goodness in my life. I'm trying to fence that in and fence out all the crap. You list a bunch of whys, and some of them I want to highlight because I find some of them funny and some of them interesting and some of them really inspirational. One of your whys is to tell your micromanager to jump in a lake.
Oh man, who doesn't love, who hasn't had a micromanager who said my way or the highway? Hey, how come you're 5 minutes late? Why are you leaving at 7 p.m.? Or don't you see I'm still here and neglecting my family? Oh my gosh, micromanager. That it's funny because I've been out of the workforce since 2012. And when I look back as an adult now, I'm 47 years old, I think it's kind of crazy that we are grown adults, mature adults, spending 40 hours a week listening to other adults tell us what to do. I mean, to me, I step back, I'm like, wow, I can see it in your teens, 20s, maybe 30s, but your whole life, give me a break.
That's what Grant Sabatier told us that recently too, Sam. He was like, the longer I've been an entrepreneur, the more I'm like, why did I endure some of that crap? Like, it just drives me crazy. You actually write about entrepreneurship and how important that can be in your journey to becoming a millionaire.
Yeah. I mean, so entrepreneurship is easy. Well, it's not easy. It's interesting to understand. So as employees, we earn our salaries and we might get lucky with some stock options and RSUs, right? But as an entrepreneur, you get your salary plus the equity in your company, right? So when you sell a company, companies are usually trading on a multiple of earnings, operating profits, or revenue. So every dollar you make from your company brings in, let's say, could increase the value of your company by 10x if the company trades at 10 times earnings, right? So if you bring in $100,000 in earnings and companies in your space sell for 10 times earnings, suddenly you've created a $1 million company. And so this type of entrepreneurial mindset in terms of making income, having these business expenses, but also creating equity at a multiple is very powerful for having $1 million in the future.
Way back in 2007, when I sold my financial planning company, I sold it for a multiple of 5x.
Great.
Yeah, it was this launch pad to just go do whatever I wanted, which was incredible. And what's funny is 5 years before that, I hadn't even thought about it, Sam, as an asset. Like, I hadn't thought about it that way when I got in. And I love the intentionality of, hey, getting in, making it a sellable asset, I think means you're going to focus on systems. You're going to focus on process. You're going to focus on building that multiple. Some of the other things, to start a family, you talked about that, or to make your family function the way that you want to start your own entrepreneurial endeavors. I like this one: to give more to the most important charities, to get the best medical treatment possible for a disability or illness, to not be afraid of the cost of going to a doctor in an emergency room. Like the whys that people have. To fly in comfort, travel the world and experience new cultures. I like flying in comfort. To go to the front of the plane, Sam, could be a nice why.
Yeah, not the bathroom seat. And I was thinking about one of the best reasons to be financially independent is really to be true to yourself. Everybody has an opinion, right? If you're a podcaster, you're a writer, you're a creator, you put out an opinion, suddenly you get 1,000 opinions. Some are very angry, some not so nice, but
you've never had that reaction to any of your pieces though.
No, not at all. Everybody agrees or disagrees. It's just black and white. No, but what's amazing is, so I've been around since 2009 with Financial Samurai, and I see the most, I will say something, the most innocuous statement, save 20% or something, right? And then I'll get maybe 1% to 5% raging commenters who will just accuse me of being judgmental, out of, in a bubble, whatever. And I understand that's fine. But it's really to have the confidence to continue to be yourself, to share your opinions, to be respectful of others, right? And then just to learn. I truly believe the wealthier you get and the more secure you are with yourself, the happier you are, because these little things don't trigger you and enrage you as much as they would if you weren't financially secure.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you've got your North Star, if you've got your why, who cares what's, and the great thing about that too, is you can go, yeah, okay, that works for you. It just doesn't work for me. I love that about once I have my why, what that does to your investing portfolio too. There's 5 million different investment choices out there, but if I know my why, that could be a great investment. It's just not for me. It just doesn't work. Speaking of investments, you talk a lot about real estate and investing and how important real estate has been for you. You really like real estate when it comes to building that millionaire muscle. How come?
Well, real estate is something that's tangible. It's easy to understand. It provides utility, shelter. It can generate income, and there are tax benefits. And so real estate, I think, is one of the best hedges against inflation and a beneficiary of inflation. Everybody needs a place to stay. And I think one of the easiest ways to build $1 million net worth is to do your best to save up a down payment, buy your primary residence so you're neutral inflation and neutral the real estate market, right? So you're going up and down with the real estate market, and you're not a price taker. You're not at the mercy of inflation. When inflation goes up, rents go up, you got to pay more. That's not good. And then after 2, 3, 10 years, you rent out your primary residence, your other primary residence, and you buy another primary residence. And so you do that over a course of 30 to 40 years, you can suddenly build a rental property portfolio that you know and love, and you can enhance it, remodel it, improve upon it, and to generate more income. And so if you can fix your living costs as much as possible, life gets much easier, right? Food, transportation, healthcare, generally manageable, but housing expenses, wow. If you don't fix that, over time, it's really going to hurt you and drag down your net worth potential.
Toward that end, you always have a way of looking at things in quirky ways, and you've got a metric in your book called the house to car ratio, which can be a key to success that I think you originally wrote about on Financial Samurai. But tell everybody a little bit about what's the house to car ratio and why is that important?
Okay. So I think everybody needs a place to live, and 90+% of Americans own a car. All right. So this ratio could be the most important and pertinent personal finance ratio in the history of personal finance ratios. Okay. So the idea is a house is generally neutral to appreciating asset. It's okay to borrow money from that because it appreciates over time. A car is a 99.9% guaranteed depreciating asset, right? So the idea is you want a little bit more house and less car. But the problem is the number one personal finance killer, I think, in America is people spending way too much money on a car that depreciates in value, and they can't use that to save and invest for the future. So the idea is you want to look at, okay, the median home price in America is $400,000. The median new car price in America is about $50,000, which is crazy because the median household income in America is about $80,000 pre-tax. So in other words, the nationwide house to car ratio is about 400,000 divided by 50,000, which is like, what is that? 8, 9, whatever. So yeah, your goal is to try to get a ratio above 30. The higher, the better. So the idea is you have more house than car. You can do that by saying you can buy a fancier house, which is, kind of suspect, or you can own a car, a cheap car, or you can own a car for longer that depreciates over time. So instead of letting depreciation hurt you as a car owner, you're allowing depreciation to help you because the car is the denominator in that ratio and it declines in value over time. So as that number, the value of the car declines, your ratio of house to car ratio increases. All right. And so I go a little bit more in depth in Financial Samurai and in Millionaire Milestones, but that is the concept. You want to have a higher ratio than the typical American, which is 8 or 9, definitely under 10. You want to get as high as possible, over 30. If you can get over 30, I think you're on the right direction.
And what does this encourage you to do? This encourages you to make a better car purchase, number one. Number two, hold on to the car for a longer period of time, which I think is important. And number three, think about, do I really need that second automobile? If I do need a second automobile, do I need a second automobile with a payment that's a big fat number? Like I'm rethinking the value of this car and the utility and what it does for me.
And it's also to help people who are spending too much on a car, think about that house. Like if you're not neutral real estate yet by owning a primary residence, what business are you doing spending so much money on a car? Maybe it's because it's easier to buy a car than a house, obviously. But before you get neutral real estate, really keep your car expenses low. And this is important to note. I say neutral real estate because you're riding up and down the real estate wave. You're only really long real estate if you own more than one property because you have to live somewhere. So you're only really gaining from real estate appreciation if you have 2 or more properties.
Speaking of real estate, I know back on the Financial Samurai podcast a few years ago, you interviewed Mike Ketchmark about the NAR ruling. He was the attorney that took the National Association of Realtors to task. How do you think that we've been talking a lot about this and really what the fallout is? And we're just, now, Sam, starting to see how this is changing the game. How do you think this long-term is going to change the game when it comes to buying a property or selling a property?
Oh, it's a huge game changer because it helps increase transparency and it gives consumers more power to negotiate. So the real estate industry will say, well, consumers can always negotiate their commission, but the reality is, how many times do consumers sell a house or buy a house? One every 13 years. That's the median holding price. So whereas if you're a real estate broker, if you're top 10% or 20% broker, you're selling multiple houses a year. So you're the expert. The consumer is not the expert. So this settlement, this lawsuit against price fixing, is about empowering the consumer to believe in their ability to negotiate lower rates. If you think about stock trading, those commissions have gone to zero. Right. But the real estate industry, the commissions are still sticky at about 5% total cost. I understand real estate brokers and agents need to make their money, both sides. But let's say you're selling your property and you agree to a 5% commission. 2.5% or half of the commission traditionally goes to the buyer's agent. Meanwhile, the buyer's agent is trying to get the lowest price possible for their client. So there's a complete misalignment in terms of the seller paying the buyer's agent who is hammering you down on price. So this misalignment needs to be fixed. And I think we can all agree it's misaligned. But what I know and realize is that sometimes, maybe oftentimes, it takes that buyer's agent, you got to pay them to bring their client to see your listing in the first place. But this should be disintermediated already, because we all know how to go online, to go to Zillow, Redfin, whatever, and see these properties ourselves, right? So the bottom line is, I believe real estate commissions will go down steadily from 5%, 4.75%, 4.5%, 4%. Maybe it might settle down to 3% or 3.5% in 5-10 years, which would be good, because then there would be less money going to the process and more money going to the buyers and sellers.
I think the big thing, and you and I talked about this even before we hit record a little bit, is that you're going to find is who the true real estate pros are, Sam. Because the pros are going to last. The people that are just out showing you the same stuff you can see on Redfin, those people aren't going to last.
Oh, yeah. So there's this thing called the top agent network, and it's the top 10% agents in terms of sales volume, and they do 80 to 90% of all sales volume. And so it's, at the end of the day, it's a relationship business. And I think the winners are going to win more and the losers are probably going to fade away.
I want to end talking about how, especially for our younger stackers, how, this march to $1 million or even heck to 250,000 can feel like this long grind. Have you ever read Bill Perkins' book, Die with Zero?
I have.
Yeah. You worked very hard on Wall Street early in your career. Do you regret those years of grinding it out at the beginning of your career? Because, Bill talks, and what people talk about when we're on that book is this idea of balance, right? Embracing going off and backpacking in Europe. Do you ever wish you had backpacked in Europe versus grinding it out on Wall Street?
I wish I grinded harder. I worked 60 hours a week, but I had at least 20 more hours a week of energy in me. And the reason why I know that is because I went to business school part-time while working 60 hours a week. And so just one point on Bill's book, and I understand the concept, and I think it's a good concept, but it is a luxury belief. Bill is worth probably over $100 million. So if you are worth over $100 million, you can say, die with zero, spend all your money, live life, and go backpacking, whatever, right? But for most of us who don't have $100 million, that's not possible. And we have to be a little bit more proactive and judicious and planning. So in your 20s, I think you'll realize you'll have more energy, more motivation, more time than you realize once you hit your 40s. I'm 47 now. And you'll realize that time goes quickly. And so while you're learning, you might as well be working as hard as you can, because you have the double benefit of earning and learning. And it's after about 10 to 15 years of compounding and saving and investing where the compounding really starts to take off. Again, 250,000, 70% chance you might make 10% return. That's $25,000. And the most you can contribute right now is $23,500. That's amazing. And the compounding aspect is something I really didn't know. I remember one of my classic posts was the first million is the easiest. And my thesis was because you have energy, time, you don't have kids, and you got all this motivation. But now that I'm way older, it's like, it's actually not the easiest. When you have money, making another million is way easier, right? 2024 S&P 500 up 23%, right? So if you had a $10 million portfolio, you're up 2.3 million. If you have if you have a $4.5 million portfolio, you're up 1 million doing nothing. And so it's very important if you're in your 20s, 30s, or just starting off, please put in that sacrifice and that time. It will pay off in huge dividends when you're older. You will be so happy you worked so hard in your 20s and 30s. I promise you this.
Do you know what I love about that answer too, Sam? As I'm thinking through it, I'm thinking two things. Number one, you learn frugality so that when you have money, you're not blowing it. Like you'll see some people that didn't come up with money and they have sudden wealth. They always seem to blow it. So you've built this muscle around how to spend money. But then the second thing is you also have this appreciation for how you got there and you built the luxury. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing to know when you're in your 40s or in your 50s, is really how hard this was to get to this place. It's a powerful thing. Oh man, I could talk about this stuff all day. And we just began talking about Sam's new work on this topic called Millionaire Milestones, Simple Steps to Seven Figures. It's available everywhere, guys. Thanks a lot, man, for being our mentor today.
Joe, thanks so much for having me. It's always been a blast.